The death of a main character in a story can have a big impact on it. It can drastically change the motion of where the story is headed. But killing a protagonist in a video game is something that I think no other type of media can replicate. Whereas in movies and TV shows you'll have several other characters who can take over as the protagonist, in video games you're playing as a whole new character whether you know them or not. But by death of the protagonist, I'm going to talk about both permanent deaths that have impact on the story, and deaths where you can respawn, because some games have done it differently to others, and because there's so many fucking videos called death in video games. Like, come on man, I gotta think of something original. I'm just going to split these into two sections because I suck at segues. Death in video games normally is quite meaningless. I mean, you respawn back with very little consequences, but all the Soul games, and more recently Elden Ring, are well known for what happens when you die. In Dark Souls and Elden Ring, there's like campfires or grace, which you can rest by. Basically, these are the checkpoints in the game. But when you die, you respawn back at the last grace or campfire you were at, with absolutely nothing to your name. You can go from having the absolute best of the best equipment to having absolutely fucking nothing. So you have to go back to your last location and get all your stuff before you die, and if you die, all your stuff disappears forever. This makes you constantly on edge and giving a real consequence to death in video games, and really giving you a reason to try and avoid dying. But no matter what consequences are in the Soul games, it will never be worse. There's Bloodborne that just constantly wants to tell you, hey man, guess what you're playing. How about Enter the Gungeon, which instead restarts you from the very beginning when you die, erasing hours of work. Many older video games did the same type of stuff with you respawning back at the beginning, which is why they put in many secrets for you to be able to skip worlds. Or you can just do what Minecraft Hardcore did and delete someone's world when they die. Mario Odyssey was the first 3D Mario game that got rid of the life system, and when you die, you lose 10 coins. This actually makes it important not to die, as you need coins to buy more outfits, which if you played the game, you kind of understand how important they are. GTA and Red Dead Redemption also does something different, since when you die, you lose money. But I mean, by the end of both these games, does it really matter? But choice-making games are very different, because if you fuck up, that's your fuck up. I think doing this makes the game all the more impactful and more personal than just respawning. This is until it's 3 AM and you're just trying to enter fucking Canada. Deaths in a story should be done right. There's nothing worse than a character dying simply for shock value, which is why I believe that Joel's death in The Last of Us Part 2 was hated so much. But I think this death was so split between the community was because the developers always saw Joel as nothing more than a villain. Because I think the point that the developers were trying to get across was how humanity can be very selfish, no matter what it costs. But that's not really how the players saw Joel. We saw Joel as Ellie's dad. I mean, years before I played the game, I just assumed they were father and daughter, because that's how the relationship between them kind of just is. The point of Joel's character in The Last of Us Part 2 is more to do with messages than actually being a character. He's kind of a warning to everyone, saying that violence, betrayal, and most importantly revenge never ends well. Joel is punished for his choice to save Ellie by losing his relationship almost entirely, and then dying right as their relationship is on the mend. Personally, I think Joel's death was a good choice, but was executed very poorly. For most of The Last of Us, you play exclusively as Joel, and only getting to play as him for about 10 minutes in the beginning of the game is probably the worst thing Naughty Dog has ever done. You didn't even play as Joel right before his death, you played as someone who was going to kill him. One day I do want to make a video about my opinion on The Last of Us Part 1 and 2, so I'm going to stop here, but I must say, I don't hate Joel. I do like his character, and I understand at the same time why people are so angry at his death. And you can't make a video about the death of a protagonist without bringing up both these games. Red Dead Redemption 1 and 2 both end with a protagonist's death, but both games are very different in how they're handled. When John Marston dies, you play as his son Jack, where you can continue the rest of the game and just play kind of normally how you would if John didn't die. I think Arthur's death is supposed to be more of a message. Earlier in the game, Hosea and Lenny talk about how they want to be buried, and Arthur says this:
"Face me to the west so I can watch the setting sun and remember all the fine times we had that way."
But instead of facing the west, he faces the east, showing how he's moving on from the gang and isn't looking back and is looking forward to John's story. Now, if you've got the High Honor ending, where you can help John, which I see as the canon ending, Arthur dies of tuberculosis. Now, I think Arthur's death is somewhat satisfying. Not because I hate him at all, but it's similar to Walter White's death. Arthur is a loyal outlaw being hunted by lawmen, the Pinkertons, and Colm O'Driscoll, and Walter cooks drugs. He's surrounded by addicts, maniacs, and psychopaths, but both characters don't die by a bullet in the head, but from their illness. But I think Arthur Morgan dying in every other cutscene by Micah just killing him or shooting him in the head really shows that the High Honor helping John ending is the canon ending. Overall, death in video games is fucking hard. It's hard to make death feel like it matters when you can just respawn at the last checkpoint. But some games have dared to do it differently, and I honestly think they're more better for doing it. Some games have dared to do it differently, and I honestly think they're better for it. And I hope in the future we can see more games kind of making consequences for death. That is fun, but I felt it was only right to leave the best death for last. So with that, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
You were hot. Guess what? You're not. You are dead, dead, dead.